assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands and of those whose interests thou hast committed to our charge. And this we beg for Jesus Christ his sake. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
Amen. Members, the House is now in session. Members, the minutes of November 4th, 2022 have been circulated. Are there any amendments or corrections? There are none. The minutes will be printed as confirmed and printed. Messages from the governor. There are none. Announcements by the speaker. Members' announcements this morning are from members we've indicated their absence today. Honorable Member Jamal Simmons, Honorable Member Zane De Silva, Honorable Member Crystal Caesar, Honorable Member Curtis Dickerson, and Honorable Member Scott Pearman have all indicated their absence today. You'll note on the order paper that it also indicates that I was going to be announcing the committees of the House today. It was a last-minute change that has to be made in reference to recent appointment that was made in the last 24 hours. So we have to adjust the committees in that regard. So they'll be done next week, next sitting. Messengers from the Senate, there are none. Papers and other communications, there are none. Petitions, there are none. Statements by ministers, I believe we have a dozen or so statements this morning. And the first is in the name of the Premier. Premier, would you like to present your statement at this time?
Good morning to you, Mr. Speaker.
Go right ahead. Mr. Premier, just before you start, let me make one announcement. The technical officer, Mr. Lamb, is not with us today. There is alternative member who's going to assist. However, to find this stuff that all information that we would normally go to SharePoint on, it's on SharePoint, but it's under House business. It was the easiest way to do it for the person who's not totally familiar with the process. Okay, so just go to House business and you'll be able to find it under SharePoint. Continue, Premier.
Thank you. I was wondering why I couldn't hear myself. Mr. Speaker, let me try that again. Mr. Speaker, in accordance with Section 2AA3 of the Government Loans Act 1978, I rise to inform this Honorable House of the issuance of a new $50 million government guarantee to Bermuda Commercial Bank for the Mortgage Guarantee Pilot Program. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, this government unveiled Bermuda's Economic Recovery Plan in this Honorable House. One of the 31 initiatives as part of that plan reads as follows, and I quote, reduce the costs of mortgages by lowering interest rates through measures to increase competition in the banking sector and by working with local banks to provide security for mortgage loans, end quote. Mr. Speaker, as Premier and Minister of Finance, I do not take the decision to increase government exposure lightly, and it is critical we take a measured approach when doing so. However, when assessing the current status of the housing market, and after listening to many hardworking Bermudians express their frustration as their dream of owning a piece of the rock becomes increasingly difficult due to rising high interest rates and high down payment requirements, it was incumbent on this government to act. Mr. Speaker, in our 2020 election platform, this government pledged to create a nation of owners and to work with local banks to reduce rates charged on mortgages. In keeping with those promises, last month, this government announced a widely applauded pilot mortgage guarantee program. Mr. Speaker, with this pilot program, the government agreed to provide a partial guarantee in support of local mortgages with the bank. In return for the reduced risk, the bank agreed to offer approved applicants a reduced interest rate starting at 5% and also to reduce the standard down payment from 20% to 10%. Mr. Speaker, the program is limited to a $50 million aggregate guarantee, and this pilot program represents a first step in the process of reducing mortgage rates in Bermuda. As the government continues to advance a broader scope initiative, which will look to reduce mortgage rates across all major local banks by leveraging the expertise of Bermuda-based reinsurers. Mr. Speaker, it is also worth noting that the government guarantee is not a traditional guarantee which guarantees each payment of the borrower and is therefore subject to being called whenever any payment is missed. Instead, it guarantees any deficiency judgment which would be outstanding after the bank properly exercises its power of sale, with the amount payable capped at $250,000 per mortgage. This approach helps to mitigate the government's risk. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, this was not an easy decision, but we proceeded with this program as it was deemed necessary and important for a better future for Bermuda and its people. Since launching this program, this government has received feedback from many young Bermudians and parents of young Bermudians who have expressed their appreciation for this initiative, which confirmed to me and this government that although difficult, this was the right decision. Mr. Speaker, as a result of this government's actions, hundreds of Bermudians will be able to qualify for a home sooner, as the typical down payment requirement has been cut by half. And Mr. Speaker, given that some local banks require as high as 30% down, the down payment reduction can be as much as 66%, saving a first-time homeowner $100,000 on their down payment for a $500,000 loan. The reduced interest rate of 5% will save new homeowners hundreds of dollars per month as a result of the lower interest rates, which is comparable to rates overseas. Mr. Speaker, we are in the first 3 phases of this pilot program. In the first phase, home buyers 40 years old and under are eligible to take advantage of this program, depending on capacity. The second and third phases will include the refinancing of existing mortgages held with BCB and other financial institutions. Mr. Speaker, it is important the public is reminded that the approval process and the relationship through the entirety of the loan will be between the borrower and the bank. The government will have no involvement or influence with any decision made by the bank in the granting of a mortgage. Mr. Speaker, it is also important to note that the government guarantee will not be in place for the entire term of the mortgage. As each loan is unique, the time period when the guarantee will fall away can differ. However, under the agreement, the duration of the guarantee for any loan cannot exceed 10 years. This process will allow the government to then apply the guarantee in support of additional borrowers. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Finance is working with the international business community, particularly with those with experience in providing insurance for mortgage default risk in the United States, to establish possible terms to ensure a portion of the exposed risk under this agreement. Mr. Speaker, as I come to a close, I'm thrilled to inform this honorable House and the people of Bermuda that 91 applications have been received by the Bermuda Commercial Bank for loans under this program. Yes, Mr. Speaker, that is 91 Bermudians who are not able to get on the property ladder who can now see their dreams become a reality. Mr. Speaker, later today, honorable members and the public will hear a speech from a party that left taxpayers with a bill of over $250 million for Morgan's Point and the privatized airport. At the same time, no action was taken to make the dream of home ownership a reality for more Bermudians. While the opposition talks, this government has a real record of delivery, and we will continue to execute Bermuda's economic recovery plan, which has contributed to the best economic growth on this island since 2007. Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to providing direct investment in the people of Bermuda and supporting economic growth in a fiscally prudent manner. The economy will benefit from a growing number of Bermudians owning homes in Bermuda, and by providing tangible support, this government is holding true to our pledge to create a nation of owners. This program is having a positive impact for many Bermudian families, and I am proud, Mr. Speaker, to lead a government that is making home ownership a reality for more Bermudians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. The next statement this morning is in the name of the Deputy Premier. Would you like to present your statement?
Yes, and good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Good morning to members of the legislature and also the listening public. Mr. Speaker, today I am tabling the bill entitled Development and Planning Amendment Act 2022. This bill proposes to amend Section 14 of the Development and Planning Act 1974 to allow an order made under Section 14(2)(f) of the Act, i.e. a use classes order, to be subject to the negative resolution procedure. The bill will also revoke the Development and Planning Use Classes Order 1975, the 1975 order. The proposed amendment to Section 14 of the Act will allow for an expedited legislative process, which provides the flexibility to make new use classes orders or any future changes to any such orders where required. Mr. Speaker, the 1975 order was last amended in 1984 and is therefore extremely out of date relative to the current type use of buildings. Mr. Speaker, the new draft Development and Planning Use Classes Order 2022 intends to provide an updated and more appropriate classification of uses of land and buildings. The 2022 order also provides clarity and appropriate differentiation between various types of uses and allows for certain changes to be made without requiring the submission of a planning application. For example, under the 2022 order, a real estate office could be changed to a bank or a doctor's office without the need to apply for planning permission. The 2022 order also represents a necessary first step for further future changes. A future change currently being developed will allow for permitted changes of use to be introduced wherein planning permission will not be required to change between classes in certain limited instances. Mr. Speaker, the 2022 order is also critical to future work of the Department of Planning on formulating planning policies to shape land use across the island, including the City of Hamilton. To this end, it is anticipated that the City of Hamilton Plan 2022 consultative draft will be published following the approval of the 2022 order. With this upcoming draft in mind, for example, under the forthcoming amendments to the Development and Planning General Development Order 1999, a restaurant in the City of Hamilton could be changed to a shop without the need for planning permission. Mr. Speaker, to summarize, the Development and Planning Amendment Bill 2022 and associated orders are critical to the development of future planning policy and the ongoing streamlining measures of the Department of Planning. The approval of and amendments to future use classes orders via the negative resolution procedure is an efficiency. In itself, whilst the 2022 order will allow for certain changes of use to occur without the need for planning permission, which will be further facilitated by the amendments to the 1999 order. Mr. Speaker, the 2022 order is not being tabled as it will become subject to the negative resolution on the passing of the bill. However, with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I intend to circulate the 2022 order to honorable members to reference when we are debating the bill. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. The next statement this morning is in the name of the Madam Attorney General. Would you like to present your statement at this stage?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to update this honorable House on the project for constitutional reform for Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda's constitution is a live instrument that must remain relevant to the needs and aspirations of our people, as it is the foundation of our constitutional democracy. The 2022 speech from the throne renews this government's commitment to exploring greater ways to improve our constitutional arrangements. We are undertaking two overarching approaches to constitutional reform. That is to say, the project of constitutional reform encompasses needed piecemeal amendments to the Bermuda Constitution Order 1968, referred to as modernizing reforms, which may or may not provide greater self-governance. Secondly, the constitutional reform project will also consider bolder steps towards a full measure of self-governance by legitimate and acceptable means. Full self-governance for territories is defined by United Nations mandates, ultimately leading to a territory's achievement of independence or sovereignty, integration with an administering state, or free association with another sovereign state. Mr. Speaker, putting piecemeal constitutional amendments to one side, members will recall that historically, the pinnacle of constitutional reform for Bermuda has focused on pathways to independence or sovereignty. Thus, the Bermuda Independence Commission's 2005 report provided seminal considerations and recommendations as Bermuda weighed the value proposition of constitutional reform leading to sovereignty at that time. Mr. Speaker, the work of the Bermuda Independence Commission and its 2005 report remain valuable to the constitutional reform project for Bermuda. We recall that the impetus for the Bermuda Independence Commission was precipitated by events such as the 1995 independence referendum, the Progressive Labor Party's win at the 1998 general election, and other global winds of change directed at achieving full self-governance for overseas territories of UN sovereign member states. A report by United Nations mission to Bermuda in 2005 also framed observations on Bermuda's readiness for self-governance. Mr. Speaker, it is the government's position that constitutional reform in today's context would be incomplete if it did not include the exploration of options for full self-governance for Bermuda, whether that is by way of sovereignty or one of the other internationally recognized pathways, such as integration or free association. Mr. Speaker, constitutional reform has featured in both the 2021 speech from the throne and the 2022 speech from the throne. The 2021 speech from the throne promised during this session, and I'm quoting, and in keeping with the United Kingdom's government's request for recommendations, the government will advance proposed amendments to the Bermuda Constitution Order 1968. Fast forward to today. The 2022 speech from the throne builds upon this by signaling the government's intent to take a wider scope to constitutional reform, encompassing a mature approach to discussions with the UK government about self-determination for Bermuda, alongside public engagement at home through wide-ranging community discussion and education. That so-called mature approach and public engagement starts now as we open up the dialogue by informing the public of the steps taken and the trajectory going forward. Mr. Speaker, in furtherance of the government's constitutional reform priorities, in May of this year, I attended the United Nations Special Committee on Decolonization seminar entitled United Nations Special Committee on the Situation with Regard to the Implementation of the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples, Pacific, regional. Recognizing the value of that experience, in June, I delivered an address at a resumed session at the United Nations General Assembly in New York City. Attendees included representatives from the remaining 17 overseas dependent territories or non-self-governing territories of the UN member states. On the heels of my UN address, I commissioned a benchmarking assessment of Bermuda's perceived readiness to advance towards greater or full self-governance. a draft report entitled Assessment of Self-Governance Sufficiency in Conformity with Internationally Recognized Standards was delivered on the 5th of October 2022 by Dr. Carlisle G. Corbin, International Advisor on Global Governance, at a contracted price of $50,000. Dr. Corbin is also a UN expert and former Minister of State for External Affairs of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Dr. Corbin is no stranger to Bermuda, having functioned as an expert for the UN's mission to Bermuda in 2005, which contributed to the Bermuda Independence Commission's exercise. He has also lectured here at Bermuda College on governance and political development. Mr. Speaker, Dr. Corbin is the best person to conduct this assessment for Bermuda, as he is the designer of the Self-Governance Indicators diagnostic tool, which assesses self-governance sufficiency and preparedness of island non-self-governing countries. Dr. Corbin's expert influence spans the globe, as he has conducted self-governance assessments across the Caribbean and Pacific regions, including countries such as Curacao, French Polynesia, Norfolk Island, Guam, and most recently for the Virgin Islands, or BVI. Since its naming in the 2022 speech from the throne, much public speculation abounds about what is contained in Dr. Corbin's report. I would describe the report as a comprehensive assessment evaluating the political, legal, and structural status of our existing constitutional model to determine Bermuda's self-governance sufficiency across 10 self-governance indicators. Mr. Speaker, the application of the self-governance indicators to Bermuda, as provided in Dr. Corbin's reports, gives insight as to areas where there are structural, political, or legal inequities in the constitutionally delegated power and authority to local officials, as assessed against the reserved powers of the sovereign as exercised by the United Kingdom government and/or Her Excellency, the Governor. The complete report is yet to be fully considered by the Cabinet, so I am cautious not to get ahead of the Cabinet's discussion and decision-making in this regard. What I will share publicly at this time is that the methodology used in the report is the preeminent tool utilized by other countries during their preparatory steps towards full self-government. It is anticipated that the final report may be ready for tabling in the legislature as soon as 2nd December 2022, once Cabinet's review is complete. Mr. Speaker, when we talk of full self-governance for territories, we must understand that it is mandated under Article 73B of the UN Charter and overseen by the work of the United Nations Special Committee on Decolonization. It is also a requirement under the UN Charter that member states support territories with the progressive realization of self-governance, decolonization, and/or sovereignty. By way of reference, the UK government's white paper, entitled The Overseas Territory Security, Success and Sustainability of 2012, represents the UK's formal public position on the relationship with its territories, including its views on constitutional reform, leading to greater self-governance and sovereignty. Mr. Speaker, as a mature nation, we know, understand, and feel the impacts of the UK's imposed limitations on the democratic will and aspirations of our people. This occurs whenever UK officials decide to exercise the reserved colonial powers with the effect of erasure or neutering local policies and mandates. The government knows all too well the frictions which arise in the relationship with the UK under our elected dependency governance status, to use a United Nations term, which abides under the 1968 Constitution of Order. Mr. Speaker, the challenges of maintaining the constitutional status quo of elected dependency governance in Bermuda is becoming starkly contrasted against local aspirations of full self-governance and the desire for a modernized relationship with the UK, one based on equality rather than subordination in a post-colonial world. It is from a position of national democratic development that we are empowered to actively consider the full range of self-governance options for Bermuda via the constitutional reform process. Mr. Speaker, let me reiterate that public information and education on the subject of constitutional reform and self-governance remains an immediate goal of the exercise, as promised in the 2022 speech from the throne. In fact, a takeaway from the UN mission's 2005 observation on Bermuda is the recognition that there were clear deficits in public awareness of the issues around self-determination. Unsurprisingly, Mr. Speaker, UN observers found little local knowledge of all the options available to Bermuda to achieve full self-governance. The historic focus on independence alone as the only option available to Bermuda can be viewed, it does not align with the range of options open to all territories seeking full self-governance under the UN Charter. In keeping with a mature and transparent approach, the government's pledge is to provide comprehensive public education and engagement to foster informed public dialogue fundamentally denied past generations as a result of entrenched exclusion from the constitutional development process that produced our 1968 Constitution. Likewise, known historic racialized disparities in political representation and the absence of other fundamental rights at the time undermined the democratic legitimacy of the constitutional model we obtained from the United Kingdom. To redress those past wrongs, we believe as a government that Bermudians must be emboldened to reframe the Constitution as a living instrument with our ambitions to construct our island community into an image and vision fit for the Bermuda of today and into the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam AG. The next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Education. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning,
Good
colleagues.
morning.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to update this honorable House and the listening public on the exciting work that is taking place to reform the public education system in Bermuda. Before I do that, however, I'd like to remind this House and the listening public of the journey to date. In 2017, the government committed to transform public education so that each and every public school student would receive a high-quality public education. This promise to the children, families, and broader community was a response to widespread community calls for change. Supported by our powerful vision for learning, our goal is for an education system where all young people are educated to lead personally and professionally, compete locally, and contribute globally. Mr. Speaker, having a parish primary school in each parish will create a learning hub for each parish, mobilizing the strengths and assets of the community in support of our schools. This model will provide the much-needed support for teaching and learning, improved educational programs and initiatives, and create strong, authentic partnerships to help schools transform into places that are relevant to the needs of the 21st century learners in Bermuda. The parish primary school model provides an opportunity for us all to have a laser-like focus on what is in the best interest of Bermuda's children and young people, both now and in their future. This means we must be always focused on equity, the critical imperative of elevating each and every learner, irrespective of their background and current circumstance. Impact, providing the opportunity for all young people to be educated to lead personally and professionally, compete locally, and contribute globally. And resourcing, better utilization of our precious resources across a fewer number of primary schools. Mr. Speaker, after extensive consultation to obtain the views, comments, questions, and feedback from persons who would be directly affected by the proposals and the wider community, a determination was made that there will be 10 parish primary schools comprising 1 school per parish, except Pembroke, which would have 2. Mr. Speaker, we acknowledge that these decisions have affected each school and school community differently. Our ongoing commitment is to sensitively handle the transition process and include opportunities for as much stakeholder and community participation as is required. The implementation of these decisions will not happen overnight, but will be phased in over the next 7 to 10 years. Mr. Speaker, honoring and preserving the history and legacy of primary schools will be a critical part of the community involvement process of transition and implementation to a new model of parish primary schools. Therefore, the ministry will continue to collaborate with community members, including persons with deep connections to schools, in order to develop the best ways to honor and preserve the history and legacy of primary schools. This work will be guided and delivered by the History and Legacy Committee. Mr. Speaker, this brings me to the update on where we are currently. Our first 2 parish primary schools have begun the transformation journey. Purvis Primary School in Warwick Parish and Francis Patton Primary and Lyceum Preschool in Hamilton Parish have been working diligently since June of this year with the support of their assistant directors and our change partners, Innovation Unit, on the school transformation process. Mr. Speaker, I am genuinely excited to be sharing both their progress with you. The school transformation teams for both Francis Patton and Purvis have undertaken research with the community to understand the hopes, dreams, and aspirations they have for their young people and the community. Identified key features of all parish primary schools, that is, they will be the hub of the community, places that make learning a priority, focused on students' interests and ambitions in and outside of school. Take place in flexible learning spaces, where students will develop 21st century skills, where teachers collaborate with each other and across schools, where families are learning partners, where students are culturally and globally connected, and where history and legacy is preserved. They've also developed blueprints for these generic features and made them locally relevant to each parish community. And we've tested these blueprints far and wide with all stakeholders in order to refine them. Mr. Speaker, after an internal process with the executive leadership team of the Department of Education to ensure that the work is of the highest quality, these blueprints have formed the basis of the next phase of work. The phase where we will work how to make these things happen. How will we bring these ideas on a page to life and ensure our teachers and community partners are both confident and competent to implement them for the benefit of all learners? Mr. Speaker, I have been grateful to participate in some of these processes and heartened to hear about the work that has been undertaken most recently. I would like to give you an example of the open houses at both the new parish primary school sites. The open houses were oversubscribed. Continuing and prospective families and community members attended in large numbers. They were excited to hear about the plans for each school. Mr. Speaker, some may even say they were impatient, wanting our parish primary schools to be ready even sooner than what we have planned. Mr. Speaker, this patient optimism is a very good problem to have. We know that in order for our country to thrive, it must have a trusted and high-performing public school system. We know we have the talent and assets on island, both within school and the broader community, to build this. And for the first time in a long time, we have a government that has the political will to see this through. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to continuing to update this House and the general public on future developments, but I implore everyone not to wait for that. Our school transformation teams for both parish primary schools and our signature schools are looking for even more people to join the education reform movement. No matter how big or small you think your contribution can be, we welcome it. You can find out more at Learning First bda.com, or by emailing schoolredesign@moed.bm. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. The next statement this morning is the name of Minister Works. Minister,
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
good morning.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I'd like to provide this honorable House with a further report on the state of the island's roads and the various ongoing trenching works. Mr. Speaker, it's worth repeating some of what was said at the beginning of this exercise. In a ministerial statement to this House on February 14, 2020, I said, and I quote, "If you are a road user in this country, then the announcement of a plan to coordinate the road trenching and remediation works with all the entities involved will be welcome news. For many years, various service providers at one time or another have on their own carried out road trenching works to install or repair equipment under the public roads, oftentimes without much regard for the landowner, the Ministry of Public Works, or indeed road users. Mr. Speaker, just over a year ago, in an effort to address this issue, the ministry implemented a policy of enforcing the issuance of trenching permits and requiring the proper reinstatement of roads following those works. Concurrently, we began discussions with Belco as the primary utility in this space to explore ways in which we all could better plan for these types of works. Once we had a working plan, other service providers were included in the discussions. The result of those discussions was an agreement to collaborate and jointly plan for these works, and effective January 1st, a coordinated approach to road trenching going forward was put into effect. These discussions were timely as Belco's need to carry out major improvements to their underground network over the next 3 years provided the opportunity to coordinate these efforts to carry out island-wide trenching and ensure that all the necessary entities were prepared and ready to install their underground equipment at the same time. Mr. Speaker, during the last 100 years, Belco has installed hundreds of miles of overhead, underground, and even undersea cables connecting homes and businesses across the island. As power needs and technology progress, this grid infrastructure has been upgraded and replaced. However, there are parts of the grid that are now over 60 years old and in need of replacement. As part of Belco's $250 million capital plan, they are making major improvements to their grid that will serve all their customers into the future with more reliable, safe, and cost-effective electricity. Mr. Speaker, part of this grid upgrade will require trenching along public roads to lay cable underground. This project is expected to last 36 months, end quote. Mr. Speaker, colleagues will also recall in March of this year, I advised this House and the listening public on the forecasts for highway works under the Ministry of Public Works. In that statement, I reminded all of the partnership between the government and Belco for the replacement of the high-voltage underground cable network throughout the island, in addition to installing new water mains and telecommunication conduit wherever feasible for future public use under the water and wastewater master plan. Mr. Speaker, my previous statements highlighted the status of the Belco project and what the public should expect for the coming year, and some 8 projects that will be progressing concurrently. Mr. Speaker, it's now been 8 months since the last update, and it's not amiss on the government that this infrastructure initiative has and continues to impact the daily commute of many, including ourselves here in this House today. Therefore, it is time for another status update, and I'm pleased to provide that. Mr. Speaker, of the 8 projects previously announced, 2 have been completed, and leaving 6 projects ongoing concurrently. Mr. Speaker, of the 6 projects, 4 are set to be completed by the end of this year, those being the multiple trenching projects on St. David's Road and along Southside Road in St. George's Parish, and works on Palmetto Road leading into the railway trail near the Department of Public Transportation entrance in Devonshire. Mr. Speaker, the remaining 4 projects are set to be completed by the end of the summer 2023. I would like to remind honorable colleagues and the listening public that with any project of this magnitude, there will be challenges that rise from time to time. To that end, it is important to note that these scheduled completion dates are tentative and subject to change. However, I am informing this honorable House that despite the challenges, there is light at the end of the tunnel. On behalf of the Ministry of Public Works, I reiterate, yes, these infrastructure projects are inconvenient for all, and that we apologize for the tiresome burden of having to spend a little extra time waiting at the trench work traffic lights. However, these improvements are critical, and if they are not undertaken, the island would be facing unexpected power blackouts and the potential for whole segments of the island to lose power for extended periods due to failures of the aged underground power infrastructure. But thanks to the forward planning and capital investment by BELCO, the hardworking private sector contractors, and the cooperation of this government, we together have averted this crisis for the country. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to now turn to the pinnacle issue, the state of the island's roads. The state of the roads can simply be surmised as inadequate, to put it bluntly. We acknowledge that these infrastructure projects have contributed to the issues as the temporary asphalting after trenching work has been uneven, but it's just meant to be that, temporary. It has never been the intention of the government to leave our roads in this manner. It is surprising to me that with all the complaints about the state of the roads, people are still driving recklessly. And when their vehicle is damaged, they are looking to government to pay for the repairs. Drivers need to slow down and drive more cautiously, generally, but more importantly during these times. Mr. Speaker, now that most projects are nearing their respective completion, the Ministry of Public Works has commenced with the permanent asphalting of the areas that the trenching works have been carried out, which will ultimately lead to smoother roadways. Those residents that travel throughout the Harrington Sound Road area will have noticed the final asphalt reinstatement beginning on Fracture Street, Wilkinson Avenue, and Harrington Sound Road. The project will continue to see final asphalting up to Flats Village over the next few months. Regarding other areas that continue to have been affected by these infrastructure repairs, the ministry is currently solidifying the 2023-24 paving schedule, and once confirmed, I will update the public accordingly. Mr. Speaker, along with the 2023 permanent asphalt reinstatement projects, there are two additional projects that are set to commence shortly. One is the installation of fiber optic lines in Flats Village. This project requires very minor road diversions, and I'm pleased to say no trenching works. And two, the desperately needed road widening and sidewalk construction from the former T.N. Tatum School to Tri-Road number 7 in Warwick. Again, no trenching works are required. This will complete the works that are currently occurring between Tri-Road number 7 and St. Anthony's Catholic Church. Agreement to proceed with these works has finally been secured with the last landowner. Mr. Speaker, we are nearing the end. As I have said in my previous statements, while I can empathize with the motoring public that the long queues and waits have been challenging at times, I want to stress that it is vital for this work to take place and that we are doing all we can to minimize the impact. To this end, I wish to publicly thank again the Acting Principal Highways Engineer, Mrs. Tina Bersero, and her team, who have been instrumental in coordinating both the BELCO and BLDC works to ensure the safety of the public and the smooth flow of traffic across the island while the work continues to take place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. The next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Social Development and Seniors. Minister?
Good morning, colleagues. Good
morning.
morning, Mr. Speaker.
Morning.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise today to provide an update to this honorable House and the general public about the current activities as it relates to the MIRRORS program and the recent decision to formally align the organization with the Department of Child and Family Services in the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, Mirrors has serviced over 500 children this year using the 8 Keys of Excellence as its foundation to build successful students, and they have provided parents with the same foundation to deepen the keys in families. The 8 Keys of Excellence are research-based principles that guide human behavior. They were developed by studying people who had achieved great success while maintaining personal excellence. Mirrors uses the 8 Keys in middle school programming and more recently with the 19 senior school students that completed the 3-day residential intensive, which allowed them to connect with one another, to reflect and take responsibility for their own personal development. Students push themselves through an intensive social-emotional development environment to grow and learn new tools to be successful students. The skills learned at camp were designed to build resilience in young people's lives and support them in every aspect of growth, creating a be great mindset. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors believes that nurturing environments enhance all wonderful qualities in children, and this is the focus of the Mirrors Coaching for Success community program. The theme for this year's cohort is Bermuda Be Great. Mirrors has intentionally built a great community of support at camp with volunteers and life coaches. These life coaches will support the students over the next 8 months to achieve their personal transformational goals. Mr. Speaker, Mirrors has just participated in the Ministry of Social Development's DCFS sponsored Parenting Expo to support parents, and I want to thank the parents for entrusting their children to Mirrors and the team of trained volunteers. Those parents who attended the parent workshop had the opportunity to explore the foundation's work for themselves and learned new ways to enhance their relationship with their sons and daughters and how to commit to being a great parent. Mr. Speaker, the transition of the Mirrors program to the Department of Child and Family Services will provide a valuable opportunity to further strengthen administrative resources, clearer workflow processes and procedures, good governance, and new community programs to be designed and offered. Mr. Speaker, our community of volunteers has demonstrated greatness in committing to our youth with the countless hours of volunteerism provided through this program to strengthen our community. Volunteers are pillars in the community for change, and for that we are grateful. We thank them for seeing the need and responding. Thank you for showing compassion and supporting the Mirrors program, and thank you for understanding the time commitments and providing your time. Today, I want you to know how much your service is appreciated by our ministry, the government, our community, and the team at Mirrors. We are forever grateful for the seeds you have sown. Mr. Speaker, Mirrors will be collaborating with parent-teacher associations over the next 6 months to expand the 8 Keys of Excellence to parents and to primary school students through assemblies. The purpose is to build a common language and principles to live by that will help strengthen themselves as parents, guardians, and build a common language between schools, home, and the community. Mr. Speaker, Mirrors has been impacting the lives of youth and making a difference in our community for over 15 years. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Somewhere along the way, we must learn that there is nothing greater than to do something for others." Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. The next statement this morning is in the name of Minister of Health. Minister?
Good morning, Mr.
Good
Speaker.
morning.
Mr. Speaker and honorable members, last month I set out the steps the government of Bermuda is taking to deliver on its promise to implement universal health coverage for all residents. In particular, the work currently occurring to deliver 3 priority projects to build the foundations of our vision, namely number 1, the National Digital Health Strategy, number 2, merging government insurance funds, and number 3, agreeing our starting points. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to update you today on the progress that we are making with respect to the item number 3, priority, agreeing our starting points project through the development of the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment by the Ministry of Health and partners across the government, the health sector, and the community. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will also recall that last month I explained the sheer complexity involved in our journey towards universal health coverage and improved population health outcomes. We have a high-level roadmap to achieve this, but we must firstly know our current starting point. In order to manage, given the island's financial constraints, we need to understand what our priority health needs are, including both physical and mental health. It is only through understanding these needs that we can align our efforts to improve the health of the people of Bermuda, and the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment aims to achieve this. Mr. Speaker, at the beginning of this month, and as previously reported, the Chief Medical Officer launched the process of developing Bermuda's Joint Strategic Needs Assessment at an event hosted by the Bermuda Health Council. The event brought together professionals from health and social care with representatives from the government, the private sector, nonprofit sector, and patient groups to start the process of developing a systematic, data-driven, and evidence-informed understanding of our population's health needs. Mr. Speaker, the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment uses an established methodology to access the current and future health and social care needs of our local community to inform local decision-making. The Joint Strategic Needs Assessment builds upon previous work to understand better the needs of our population, such as the 2016 census and the 2017 Health and Review reports. However, this is the first assessment to systematically capture all of the relevant information to give a complete picture of our health. Mr. Speaker, I want to emphasize the joint nature of the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. We aim for the process to be locally owned and collaborative, involving all relevant stakeholders and produced openly and transparent. The ministry will, of course, provide the personnel with the technical expertise to coordinate the production of the report. But I believe that the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment will be a product that reaches beyond government and can be a valuable tool for the private and nonprofit sector as well. Mr. Speaker, many honorable members will be aware that it is not just medical care that influences our health. Social and economic conditions, including our work, housing, education, and local community networks, are important factors that define our health. These factors are known by public health professionals as the social determinants of health. The Joint Strategic Needs Assessment will investigate the social determinants of health in the context of Bermuda and make recommendations that go beyond the healthcare sector. This presents an opportunity for the whole of government and civic society to use the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment to develop actions to protect and promote health using the concept of the social determinants of health, whether in the classroom, the workplace, or in the local environment. I urge all honorable members to read the final Joint Strategic Needs Assessment report and consider ways that they can contribute to improving health and reducing health inequalities in their local communities. Mr. Speaker, the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment will be vital in determining our baseline population health needs in order to establish the necessary metrics to monitor the impact of the introduction of universal health coverage on population health outcomes. The Joint Strategic Needs Assessment will do this through the consideration of the following areas, Mr. Speaker. 1, Bermuda's population profile and the social determinants of health. 2, health behavior and risk factors. 3, causes of ill health and death. 4, vulnerable groups, including children, the elderly, and people with disabilities. And 5, healthcare services. Mr. Speaker, our approach to developing the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment will be through the following processes. 1, mapping data sources. 2, extracting data from these sources. And 3, analyzing and interpreting these data in our local context. This will culminate in a Joint Strategic Needs Assessment report being published by April 2023, outlining a statement of needs and making recommendations. Mr. Speaker, honorable members may have noticed that the process relies heavily on data, but this will be supplemented by gaining insight from healthcare professionals, patients, and the public on Bermuda's current state of health. Mr. Speaker, we are fortunate to have the professional expertise of the Chief Medical Officer in crafting the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. He is chairing the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment Working Group, which is a skilled multidisciplinary team charged with the production, publication, and presentation of the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. The working group's members include representatives from the Ministry of Health, public health professionals, epidemiologists, health promotion professionals, and also representatives from the Bermuda Health Council. This working group is supported by the Epidemiology and Surveillance Unit, joined by a public health registrar seconded, from the UK's public health training program. The UK Overseas Territories team at the Department of Health and Social Care in London will provide additional technical support. This team has a wealth of experience in supporting communities in understanding their health needs. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will recall my desire last month to ensure that our work towards universal health coverage remains clear, coherent, and coordinated whilst discouraging silos. The Joint Strategic Needs Assessment Project will be managed in line with these principles, involving regular touchpoint meetings with strategic partners and the other universal health coverage projects to identify areas of overlap and opportunities for mutual support. In line with this commitment and in part of the ministry's quarterly Q&A session on Tuesday, November 15th, universal health coverage stakeholders from across our health system and the wider community were updated on the progress of the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment and were able to ask detailed questions about the project's development. Mr. Speaker, the core vision of the heart of this government's health strategy is for Bermuda to provide an environment for healthy people and healthy communities. The strategy is based on 8 strategic principles, of which understanding our population's health needs is an important one. The Joint Strategic Needs Assessment will play a crucial role in understanding our population's health needs. The Joint Strategic Needs Assessment takes a pragmatic approach in emphasizing our community's assets as well as our needs. We need to accurately know our start state, including gaps in our knowledge, to inform our future. In fact, understanding gaps in our knowledge will help us refine the development of the National Digital Health Strategy and identify future data collection and health surveillance requirements to refine the metrics required for measuring future progress. Mr. Speaker, this is an exciting moment as we build momentum towards fulfilling the Government of Bermuda's commitment to implementing universal health coverage while seeking to improve Bermuda's population health outcomes and reduce health inequalities. We can only make progress if we have an accurate understanding of our start state. The Joint Strategic Needs Assessment will provide the data-driven and evidence-informed information to gain this understanding. And I want to thank all those contributing to the development of the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, particularly those outside of government in the community, health sector, and voluntary sectors. And I look forward to seeing the results of their hard work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. The next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Economy and Labor. Minister?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to table the bill entitled the Bermuda Protection Amendment Act 2022. The purpose of this bill is to clarify and strengthen the provisions related to the unrestricted period of residence of visitors to Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, this honorable House may recall that in July 2020, the Ministry of Economy and Labor extended the maximum period for a visitor to stay in Bermuda from 90 days to 180 days in accordance with the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Act. The extended period sought to encourage longer visitor stays and greater economic activity. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to specifically refers to a cumulative maximum period of 180 days in any 12-month period. Mr. Speaker, Section 28(2) of BEPA defines unrestricted period of residence in relation to a visitor to Bermuda as the period of 6 months beginning the date on which the visitor lands in Bermuda, or a lesser period as the minister may specify by notice in writing served on that visitor. This means that if a visitor leaves and returns to Bermuda, upon returning, the visitor lands anew. Mr. Speaker, the conundrum is that trying to interpret the current provisions in BEPA to refer to a maximum period of 6 months in any 1 year would be straining the meaning of the words in the section, particularly because the section does not mention 1 year. Also, visitors can take advantage of the current policy by residing in Bermuda and circumventing immigration control. For example, a visitor can arrive in Bermuda, stay for a period of 6 months, leave for 1 day, and return the next day and reside in Bermuda for another period of 6 months. Mr. Speaker, to address this problem, the resulting amendments to BEPA is that the unrestricted period of residence will be from 6 months from the date the visitor lands in Bermuda to a cumulative maximum period of 6 months in any 12-month period from the first arrival date within the 12-month period. The amendments by way of this bill will mitigate visitors circumventing immigration control. Mr. Speaker, the bill will come into force at a later date by notice in the Gazette. The bill will only impact visitors whose unrestricted period of residence or lesser stays commences within the 6-month period prior to coming into operation of the bill. In this case, such period or lesser stays will be computed under the revised changes to enable the necessary transition. The ministry will undertake a public awareness campaign regarding these changes so that visitors understand in advance how they may be affected. Guidance will also be provided pursuant to the bill for persons who may be so impacted once the bill comes into effect. Mr. Speaker, the functionality of the clarity of the unrestricted period of residence for all visitors will be calculated and monitored in the Department of Immigration's border management system by the addition of a new feature in the system which will detail the allowed length of stay per calendar year for all visitors. The completion of the work undertaken by the vendor for the BMS will determine when exactly the bill will come into operation. Mr. Speaker, as has been done during the past 12 months, at least this ministry will continue to ensure that visitors and all stakeholders are informed about alternative options to reside in Bermuda for longer, uninterrupted periods, i.e., the work from Bermuda and permission to reside on an annual basis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. The next statement this morning is also yours, Minister.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, again. I am pleased to rise to provide the members of this honorable House an overview of the Employment Minimum Wage Entitlement Bill 2020 that has been tabled and set for debate in the next sitting of this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, as highlighted in the 2020 speech from the Throne and the Economic Recovery Plan, this government has made a commitment to the employees of Bermuda to ensure they receive a dignified wage which will allow them to cover the basic needs. In October 2019, the Employment Wage Commission Act 2019 came into effect, which established the Wage Commission tasked with inquiring into the provisions of a statutory wage scheme and recommending to the minister responsible for labor a minimum hourly wage and a living wage rate. Mr. Speaker, in January 2020, the commission was presented to the public and began its work in earnest. In April 2021, the commission provided the minister responsible for labor with its report on a minimum hourly wage rate, which detailed its recommendations for such wage rate in Bermuda. This bill establishes the regulatory regime around the implementation of the statutory wage scheme by introducing provisions to give employees in Bermuda a right of entitlement to a statutory minimum wage, as well as sets out enforcement provisions to support the right to a statutory minimum wage rate for Bermuda's workforce. Mr. Speaker, all employees are entitled to be paid for hours worked and should have the confidence in knowing that their employer is complying with its obligations pursuant to the bill by paying them at least the statutory minimum hourly wage rate. The bill establishes a procedure to be followed to ascertain whether a person who is entitled to receive the statutory hourly wage rate is actually receiving it. Employees entitled to the statutory minimum hourly wage under the bill are employees referred to in sections 3A, 32A of the Employment Wage Commission Act 2019. The statutory minimum hourly wage shall not apply to employees referred to in section 32B of that act, as amended by this bill. Mr. Speaker, employers will be required to retain records to show that they are complying with their obligations to pay the statutory minimum hourly wage rate to their employees. In turn, an employee who has reasonable grounds to believe that their employer has paid them a rate which is less than the minimum hourly wage may make a request to assess their records in this regard. Labor inspectors will have the authority to investigate an employee's complaint against his employer pursuant to the bill and issue enforcement notices to employers who have failed to correctly remunerate an employee or employees. Mr. Speaker, employers who breach the bill will be subject to a civil penalty regime, which will entail a faster, less laborious process for handling breaches. This penalty will be calculated at a rate equal to twice the amount of the minimum hourly wage in respect of the worker that the failure relates to for each day that the failure persists. The ministry intends to bring into force on the 1st of June 2023 a statutory minimum wage rate of $16.40, which will be one of the highest minimum wage rates in the world. Mr. Speaker, many jurisdictions view minimum wages as a vehicle to take the lowest paid out of poverty. Others view it as a wage floor, below which employers are not permitted to pay. Regardless of the approach, this will improve the lives of workers, especially those within occupations with traditionally low levels of remuneration. In addition, it provides a level of confidence that employers will be held accountable should they fail to adhere to the payment of a statutory hourly minimum wage. Mr. Speaker, as identified in the ILO's Global Wage Report 2020-2021, the extent to which a minimum wage may reduce wage and income inequality depends on at least three key factors: the effectiveness of minimum wages, the level at which minimum wages are set, and the characteristics of minimum wage earners. The first condition comprises the extent of the legal coverage and the level of compliance, which, when combined, may be called the effectiveness of minimum wages. This bill seeks to satisfy the first of those conditions by ensuring that employers are compliant with providing their workers with a minimum wage and enabling a framework for inspection and investigation of complaints. Mr. Speaker, the ministry would like to thank the members of this honorable House for the opportunity to address them in this regard. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. The next minister up this morning for statement is the Minister of Transport. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise before the Honorable House today to share with my honorable colleagues some very positive prospects for Bermuda within the cruise ship industry in the next year, 2023. Mr. Speaker, the principal responsibility of cruise ship lays within the Ministry of Transport, working very closely with the Bermuda Tourism Authority, who promotes Bermuda, and our key internal and external industry stakeholders and cruise line partners. Mr. Speaker, in the recent years, the focus has been on the following: to attract a mix of cruise brands, including large and small ships, diversify home ports by attracting more calls from Baltimore, Norfolk, and other southeastern ports, encourage more overnight stays, and this is growing year over year. Diversify activities for cruise ship visitors, consistent with the mandate of the Bermuda Tourism Authority. This includes consultation with the cruise lines. Enhancement of the visitor service center experience, consistent with the mandate of the Bermuda Tourism Authority. Ensure consistency with the National Tourism Plan objectives. Attract Disney Cruise Line and the continuation of growth with this line. Increase of Carnival Cruise Line's calls in off-peak season. Increase passenger tax. Creation of an infrastructure tax, and create a visitor's fee for income for BTA. This was implemented. And make Bermuda a year-round cruise ship destination. The Ministry of Transport and the Bermuda Tourism Authority has successfully marketed Bermuda to have a cruise ship in port in every calendar month. Mr. Speaker, it is important for me to give some historical data and some experience with the cruise line so that it's clear how Bermuda has come. 10 years ago, 2013, Bermuda was hosting larger ships at dockyard, while still trying to recover the loss of regular small boutique ships calling in Hamilton and St. George's. That year, there were 123 ship calls, which brought 340,000 passengers to Bermuda, with an economic impact of $67 million into Bermuda economy. Mr. Speaker, between 2014 and 2016, there was a marginal increase in cruise ships activity, 130, 136, and 139 calls respectively, bringing between 355,000 and 397,000 passengers, and between $67 and $76 million in activity to our island. Mr. Speaker, 2017 saw an increase from 139 to 161 calls, an increase of 16%, and 418,000 passengers visited Bermuda in 2017, and $81 million was spent in our economy. However, in 2018, we saw a paradigm shift when Bermuda's effort in promoting Bermuda as a round-year cruise destination saw an increase in occasional callers and big increase in passenger spending. In 2018, 180 cruise ships visited Bermuda, with 480,000 passengers, and cruise ship economic activity increased to $148 million. Mr. Speaker, in 2019, the Bermuda government introduced the restructuring of cruise ship taxes and cabin tax fallowing. A new visitor fee of $16 per person was introduced and is collected by Bermuda Tourism Authority. The transport infrastructure tax was introduced at $25 per person, and the passenger tax was increased to $25 per person for ships that berth at dockyard. In 2019, 184 cruise ships visited Bermuda, and economic impact was $170 million. Mr. Speaker, the year 2020 was forecast to be a significant year for Bermuda, with 193 scheduled calls on the books. Instead, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, COVID-19 pandemic brought the cruise ship industry to almost complete halt. Bermuda received 4 winter calls with 9,000 passengers and $1 million in economic activity. Mr. Speaker, 2021 was a year filled with a glimmer of hope. Never before had the Ministry of Transport worked outside of the box with so many agencies, internally and externally, including the Ministry of Health and other departments, to sustain cruise industry while in a worldwide pandemic. Home porting and passengers flying into and out of Bermuda with Viking Cruise was born in 2021, in part to the great on-the-ground coordination of the port agent and their stakeholder support team. Crystal and Norwegian Cruise Line also continued service that year, for a total of 14,000 passengers arriving. In 2021, the economic impact created was $11 million, and it was a lifetime for many residents at the time. Mr. Speaker, during the 2020-23 budget process, the Ministry of Transport was conservative in forecasting the 2022 cruise ship season. In February, the world was still operating with COVID-19 guidelines. Bermuda started the season softly at 50% capacity, and by June grew to 78%, and by July, 86%. And during some weeks in July and early August, some ships sailed at maximum capacity. The season then petered off slowly, but maintained above average capacity. Last week in the press statement, I shared with the public that 2022 season was estimated to end with approximately 39,000 passengers and approximate economic impact of $156 million. So, Mr. Speaker, we've come from 2016 with an economic impact of $76 million to, in 2021, we are now at $156 million. The 2022 season is now drawing to an end, and final numbers will be known shortly. Mr. Speaker, since the PRP has been in government, there's been an increase of 19% cruise ships calls, an economic impact of 105% from $76 million, as I mentioned, to $256 million in 2022. Mr. Speaker, what COVID-19 told us is how the cruise ship industry means, what the cruise ship industry means to Bermuda. Before COVID, it was not uncommon to hear that cruise ship passengers do not spend money in Bermuda and have no bearing to the average man on the street. We now know for certain how important the cruise ship industry is to Bermuda.
Yep.
The cruise ship dollar touches the lives of everyday public service vehicle operators, retail and restaurant employees, tour boat operators, tour guides, lifeguards, artists, and sightseeing attraction, and much, much more. Mr. Speaker, looking ahead, I'm very pleased to provide the 2033 cruise ship industry projection for the country. The future looks bright. I'm reminded that 2023 cruise ship schedule remained fluid with 223 calls. As of November 3rd, cruise ship schedule 80% capacity projection, estimated at 559,000 ship passengers, and revenues estimated at $143 million in passenger and cruise spending, $23.6 million in passenger tax, $10.2 million in transport infrastructure tax, $6.6 million in the visitor's fee, $12.4 million in cruise ship port expenses, for a total estimated economic impact of $200 million in 2023, which is an increase of 28% over 2022 estimate economic impact. And if the weather is accommodating, Mr. Speaker, it could be more. Mr. Speaker, in 2023, our two contract partners are scheduled to bring 171 calls between them. Norwegian Cruise Line has 100 calls, of which 84 calls are larger ships and 16 calls are small luxury brands. Royal Caribbean Cruise Line is scheduled to bring 71 calls, of which 50 calls are the Royal brand and 21 calls are Celebrity brand. In addition, Mr. Speaker, Carnival Cruise Line is scheduled to bring 12 calls, 9 from Carnival brand and 3 from Costa brand. And Disney Cruise has increased its call in 2023 to 11. Mr. Speaker, we continue to build a luxury market for small ships. Hamilton will see an increase in 2023 with 24 calls, and St. George's will have 10 calls. Also of note, the first visit from Ritz-Carlton Yacht Collection with the MS Evermont arrives on April 17. And Mr. Speaker, new this year from Seabourn Cruise Line is Seabourn Aviation, arrive on April 12th, and from Seabourn Yacht Club is the Seabourn 2 on April 26th, and from Scenic Luxury Cruise is Scenic Eclipse 2, arrive on October 16. Returning, Mr. Speaker, is Silver Sea Cruises. They have 2 cruise ships in 2023, and they are the Silver Shadow and Silver Nova on November 16 and 22 respectively. Of note, the Silver Nova is the first LNG fuel vessel, liquid natural gas, clean burning fuel to visit Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, in closing, we have come a long way since 2013, since we hosted 123 cruise ship calls. And now we look forward to welcoming up to 223 calls in 2023, spread throughout the year. That's 100 more calls in 10 years in 2023 forecast, which increased to an 81% increase for the period. We have a lot to be grateful for. But 2023 season starts off in January with 8 calls. Weather permitting, and the cruise ship schedule can be downloaded at www.marineandports.bm, and we encourage all stakeholders to do so often. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank all the staff at the Ministry of Transport, particularly Ms. Stacey Evans, who have worked so diligently over the years to with all stakeholders to achieve the many milestones after in my fourth statement today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. The next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Transport. Minister of Tourism and the Cabinet Officer. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning
Good morning.
to you, my colleagues, and the listening public. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, as we meet today in this honorable house, the Bermuda Tourism Authority is hosting the Bermuda Tourism Summit 2022. Organizers have invited tourism stakeholders, business owners, and members of the community to join the forum. The day-long summit is at the Hamilton Princess and Beach Club, with the theme being Power of Partnerships 2.0. Mr. Speaker, the event will provide updates on BTA sales, marketing, and partnership activities, and will feature speakers giving industry insights and introducing tools and techniques to help support tourism entrepreneurs, employees, and employers. Attendees will hear from the BTA's new leadership team on ongoing initiatives, upcoming programs, and the overall strategy for leveraging partnerships for success. Mr. Speaker, the summit takes place against the background of confirmed third quarter tourism performance for the period ending September 30, 2022, showing some signs of continued and gradual recovery. Tourism measures have seen growth over 2021, including growth from the UK, while traditional air arrivals from the US and Canada lagged. Total year-to-date leisure air arrivals at 79,745 represent growth of 76.1% year-to-date over 2021 figures. Specifically, leisure travel from the UK down just 27.6% compared to 2019, has shown a much swifter recovery than other primary markets, including the US and Canada. The sluggish recovery in these key areas must be addressed, and the challenge to the BTA is to create the demand that will drive an increase in these numbers. Mr. Speaker, in the maritime sector, Bermuda has also seen growth approaching pre-pandemic numbers. Cruise travel brought 176,650 passengers to Bermuda in Q3, driving the year-to-date totals to 302,777, 32.3% behind 2019 passenger numbers. There were 40 yacht calls in the third quarter, which is 11% behind 2019. Year-to-date yacht visits have totaled 686, 9.6% off the volumes of 2019. The super yacht category has seen 80 calls since the beginning of the year, a milestone which exceeds 2020 figures. The year-to-date economic impact from the growth in super yachts has likewise grown to 2.9 million, representing a 104.7% increase over 2020. Mr. Speaker, the shifts in Bermuda's visitor profile, which has seen increases in boomer visitors, demonstrates the need for the BTA to develop and grow the strategy to attract young travelers, as the pace of return for this group has been less robust. There has also been growth in the categories of visitors traveling for business and air visitors whose purpose of travel was to visit friends and relatives. In the latter case, the number of visitors was up 68.7% over 2021. Mr. Speaker, whilst the total visitor expenditure of $95.7 million was down by 30%, per person expenditure in Q3 increased to $1,941 per leisure air traveler, exceeding the per person spend in the same period in 2019 by 20.9%. Mr. Speaker, among the issues to be discussed in today's tourism summit is the critical situation on airlift. It is welcome news that British Airways will resume 7-day-a-week service between Heathrow and Bermuda in March 2023. However, honorable members will have noted that Bermuda's air visitor volumes were down by 44% this quarter when compared to 2019. With my colleague, the Minister of Transport, we must work closely on air service development. The key stakeholders presently include the Bermuda Airport Authority, the BTA, and Skyport. The refinement of air service development policy can be expanded to include other representative groups whose livelihoods and success depend on our ability to connect Bermuda to key gateway cities. Mr. Speaker, a significant adverse factor in our air service development is the lack of hotel inventory. Our current air capacity sits at 39.3% below 2019 for Q3, but it is encouraging news that the load factors remain strong, increasing 2.6% above 2019 levels. In a statement to this Honorable House in February of this year, the Honorable Premier set out the impact of lacking hotel inventory on airlift. Quoting the president of Skyport, he said, "In addition to streamlining border entry requirements, getting the Fairmont Southampton Hotel property back online as soon as possible is absolutely critical to Bermuda recapturing the optimum number of air passengers and ultimately safeguarding our air service options." To that end, Mr. Speaker, and in anticipation of questions from honorable members opposite, I can confirm that the technical and legal work to close the full deal on the redevelopment of the Fairmont Southampton continues in earnest. Teams representing the senior and mezzanine lenders, the local lenders, the Government of Bermuda and West End Properties, GenCom, are working their way through all of the complex agreements and documents required to close a project valued at hundreds of millions of dollars and which represents 600 jobs in this economy. Mr. Speaker, research conducted to support the BTA's 2022-2023 Strategic Recovery Plan has provided a focus for the organization's efforts for the remainder of this year and through the next. Bermuda must reestablish itself as a top travel consideration. The desire for travel exists in our key markets, but Bermuda is not featuring prominently as a top travel consideration, and the BTA's principal mission must be to reverse this. All other aspects of the plan feed into this principal task and will make the promotion of group business, an increase in visitors from the UK and Europe, and increased airlift easier to achieve. Concurrently, Mr. Speaker, we must also continue to improve the visitor experience. In the course of today's proceedings, we will consider the speech from the throne, and honorable members will have noted that there is specific mention of the number one complaint of visitors: our transport system's inability to move people, especially at peak periods. This is not for the BTA alone and will require them, the Ministry of Tourism, and the Cabinet Office, working with the Ministry of Transport to bring long-awaited reforms to this area. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that we are in a challenging period in the tourism industry. However, there is cause for optimism. We see hoteliers entrusting Bermudian talent to management roles, and by extension, providing entry-level opportunities for Bermudians willing to make a start in the field. Key flights are returning to service, and there is commitment at every level to do what is required to renew Gateway City access with our airline partners. There is a tremendous amount of work ahead, and it will require innovation, targeted allocation of human and fiscal resources, and a willingness to make changes here at home to provide the best possible experience for our visitors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. The next statement this morning, which is the final statement, is in the name of the Minister of National Security. Minister?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Morning.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to give this honorable House an update on the community violence workshop that was held at the end of September. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that in May of this year, I made a statement to this honorable House on addressing violence in Bermuda. Not more than 48 hours after my appointment in April, I found myself performing the grim task of offering condolences to two families who were dealing with the grief of losing their young sons to gun violence. Mr. Speaker, I have in the ministry headquarters offices a poster with the names and ages of the 81 persons who have been murdered in Bermuda since 2003. I see that every day and reminds me of my purpose, as they are not merely statistics. In less than 20 years, we have had 81 murders. Actually more, Mr. Speaker. Just let that sink in. 81 murders in less than 20 years. The youngest victim was only 14 years old when her life was taken. Most of the victims, Mr. Speaker, are in their 20s. Nothing is more precious than life itself, and we must do all we can to stop this. How did we as a community get here? Mr. Speaker, violence and antisocial behavior is a serious threat to our community, and it continues to be my top priority. I have stated on a number of occasions that we will not police our way out of this. That is the reality. Community violence and antisocial behavior is a community problem that requires a community response. Mr. Speaker, in June, I held a town hall meeting on the issue at Bayless Bay Cricket Club, and then another at St. Paul's Church in the city of Hamilton in July. I was very encouraged by the number of persons that attended and the open and honest feedback that I had received. Mr. Speaker, following the town hall meetings, the community violence workshop was convened on September 29th and 30th of this year to get feedback from key stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, the community violence workshop was to build on the town hall meetings to find real solutions, Bermuda-based solutions to our problem. I invited representatives from several government departments across multiple ministries, including health, education, youth, sport, and culture, and of course, national security. Also invited were helping agencies, including charities that work with young people who are touched by community violence and antisocial behavior. I invited clergy, sports clubs, and community activists. Mr. Speaker, I even invited representatives from the opposition because this issue is bigger than party politics, and only together can we tackle this issue. I would like to thank all those who attended and for giving of their time and expertise. Mr. Speaker, the overall purpose of the workshop was to have a real honest look at our response to community violence and antisocial behavior. We must have a coordinated and actionable plan for prevention, intervention, and reintegration of offenders. This is not a workshop where we ask people to sit and listen to an overseas expert tell us how we should fix this. This was an opportunity for key local stakeholders to roll up their sleeves and work on real solutions by having an open and frank discussion on not only what we are doing, but what is not working and what we should be doing. Mr. Speaker, I ask participants to be honest and not hold back. We need to know where there are gaps in services, duplication of services, and a need for resources and further services. We need to know what works, what doesn't, what we are doing well, and where we must make improvements. This was not a finger-pointing session, Mr. Speaker. This was an opportunity to review where we are and what needs to be done for a safer community. Mr. Speaker, I know participants were heartened by the remarks of the Premier at the opening of the workshop. He spoke of this government's commitment to tackling this issue. Commitment not just in words, but with resources as well. Mr. Speaker, the conversations that were held over these 2 days were rich and thought-provoking. Topics discussed included issues around mental health, economic security, family, education, Bermuda's history, and culture. Participants did not just discuss the work of others, but looked within. Service delivery was discussed, enabling people to openly review not only how their organization worked, but also how they could work more effectively with other entities or with additional resources. These kinds of conversations will allow us to work better in the future, and for that, I am grateful. Mr. Speaker, it is with this information that a strategy and action plan on addressing community violence and antisocial behavior will be created. A plan where all of Bermuda is involved and nerves and plays a role. Bermuda requires a plan that reflects the needs, thoughts, and desires of the community in combating this national issue, and that is what we intend to provide. Mr. Speaker, there's another segment of the community that must be consulted with. They are integral to the success of the strategy. That is our young people themselves. Too often our young people are talked about or talked at. We must include them, understand their views and experiences, and take their advice. Over the next several weeks, we have been already, and we will be continuing to talk to groups of young people to get their views on their Bermuda. It is for them we work, and it's with them that we will succeed. Mr. Speaker, there's much work to be done over the next few months, and this government is serious about creating a way forward that has real impact on our communities. I want to invest in our communities so we can restore the feelings of safety and community we once had and stop the violence and antisocial behavior. Mr. Speaker, there are many entities, including the public and third sector, whose work mitigates violence and antisocial behavior in Bermuda. It has a positive impact. They save lives and help vulnerable youth to make and take positive life choices. We need to build on this work, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, following the youth engagement, I will be inviting a number of the key stakeholders to assist in the completion of the strategy and action plan. I look forward to updating this House when that work is completed and providing the details at that time. So, Mr. Speaker, in closing, you will note that I have not said this is a gang issue. Saying it is a gang issue is a convenient label that gives some comfort, as those people in those neighborhoods. It belies the fact that the violence and antisocial behavior is a community-wide problem and not a gang issue, and will only be solved by the community as a whole. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, that brings us to a close of the statements for this morning. Before I move on, I'd just like to acknowledge in the gallery here, former Member of Parliament, Mr. Walter Lister, who has graced us with his presence this morning. Welcome to the chamber. The next item on the order paper this morning is reports of committees. There are none. We'll move on to the question and answer period. And we have questions this morning as the first question for the Premier in reference to his statement. Premier, you have a question from the opposition leader. Opposition leader?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In regards to the $250,000 guarantee, is the guarantee agreement a tripartite agreement between the government, bank, and client or applicant?
Premier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the answer is it is between the government of Bermuda and the bank, as stated in the statement.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Can the minister provide the criteria for the application of the guarantee to the individuals applying for a mortgage?
Premier?
I'm not entirely certain of the question. I think the statement did refer to the fact that the relationship is managed between the client and the bank specifically. And so those eligible persons who are applying for a loan underneath this program, those be first-time home buyers under the age of 40 in phase one, but they have to meet the criteria which is established by the bank. The statement was very clear that the government is not involved in the approval process or anything in that regards. That is a relationship between the bank and the applicant.
Supplementary? Second question. Okay. Supplementary? Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
MP
Speaker.
Jackson?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. My question is around the bank relationship with the buyer. So will government be assisting any of the buyers that may be at another bank and want to move over to BCB in order to participate in this guarantee program?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Honorable Opposition Leader did say, that is in the statement, that is part of phase 2 and future phases of the program. The first phase is for first-time home buyers under the age of 40. And at this point in time, as I said, there are 91 applicants thus far to this program, but that is just the first phase.
Thank you. Your second question?
The Minister of Finance confirmed that the terms for the guarantee is 10 years. Now, if you are in the business, you'll know that the mortgages will last for 10, 15, 20, in some cases, 25 years.
Mhm.
What happens after the 10-year period has expired?
Right.
Will the mortgages, well, that's what happens.
Premier?
If the mortgage is not paid, people will continue to pay on their mortgage, but the guarantee is for a maximum of 10 years because the guarantee is for a specific portion. The guarantee could fall off prior to that, depending on the loan to value ratio.
Supplementary?
Supplementary. As there will be added risk to the bank because the guarantee is taken away, is the Premier aware that the mortgage may have to be re-underwritten because the application and the criteria for issuing the initial mortgage had changed? And so it may be more expensive to the applicant.
Premier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't necessarily agree with what the opposition leader is saying, but I'm happy to have a fulsome discussion with him, and he can come to the Ministry of Finance and get the full background on the program. But insofar as what he's saying, I do not necessarily agree that that is the case about loans being re-underwritten. Yes, there is a relationship between the bank and the guarantor, and the guarantee has specific provisions based upon certain ratios. But for persons who qualify underneath this program, they will have a rate of less than 2% less the base rate, which at this point in time is 5% at the Bermuda Commercial Bank, and the guarantee is for a maximum of 10 years. It can fall off quicker, but it is for a maximum of 10 years.
Second sub?
Supplemental.
Okay. Opposition Whip?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplemental question. Does the Honorable Premier know if this program will impact the bank's regulatory capital at all? That is the level of capital the bank is required to hold to facilitate the program?
Premier?
What I can say is that the bank, the Ministry of Finance, certainly worked with the regulator to ensure that all was in place. So I'm not entirely certain what the honorable opposition member is asking specifically, but what I can say is that, especially when it came to a lower down payment and those type of things, they were checked off with the Bermuda Monetary Authority. The Bermuda Monetary Authority is comfortable with this advancing.
Thank you. Supplementary? Okay. Yes.
Thank you. As you know, Mr. Speaker, I work in banking, and I heard the Premier's response in regards to my question about after 10 years. I just like for the Premier to understand or ask him the question is he aware that the terms of the mortgage will change after the 10-year guarantee has expired? And as the terms of the mortgage will change, it provides institutions with the ability to re-underwrite the mortgage. So can he speak to that?
Premier?
The honorable member is making an assumption that the terms will change. What we've been informed is that the terms will not change, and I'm happy to seek additional clarity for the honorable member if he wishes. As with all things, it will determine on the individual performance of the loan. For clarity insofar as the issue of when the guarantee falls off, the guarantee does fall off when the loan to value is under 80%.
Third question? None? Okay, thank you. Premier, that's the only question for you today. Thank you, members. The next questions this morning are for the AG. Madam AG, you have questions from a few members. First is from the opposition leader. Opposition leader?
First of all, I'd like to thank the AG for her report. My first question is, why did we engage Dr. Carlisle Corbett for the constitutional reform report when we had prepared a similar report by the Bermuda Independence Commission under Premier Alex Scott in 2005?
Madam AG?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The report that was commissioned from Dr. Corbin is miles apart from the Bermuda Independence Commission report, and it's very specific to the subject matter as far as it deals with the indicators of self-sufficiency as they pertain to self-governance.
Thank you. Supplementary? Just sub?
Can the AG provide more details on the deficiencies that were presented in the Bermuda Independent Commission's report of 2005?
AG?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My report today was not focused on the deficiencies of the Bermuda Independence report. It was drawing a comparison in terms of the work that has not been completed subsequent to that report, which we've undertaken as a government to continue. I'm happy to lay through the report to, or the member can be supplied with the so-called deficiencies if I'm able to identify them in a way that's satisfactory to him. But that's not our focus today. Our focus is to continue the work of that commission, which was from 2005, which is a sad indictment on all of us, given that the UN has a mandate for decolonization that's now 60 years old. Thank you.
Further supplementary or new question?
New question.
Okay.
In accordance with good governance, can the AG make a commitment to this House that the report will not only show the benefits, but also show the challenges in regards to the options presented in regards to independence, integration, and free association?
AG?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The report will be comprehensive, or is comprehensive with regard to the issues that he raised. I'm sure when it's tabled in this House on December 2nd, the member will be able to get a greater insight in terms of the questions that he's raised. It's very comprehensive.
Yeah. Supplementary? Their question, none? Okay. AG, the MP Kennedy would like to put questions to you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the minister for this statement. I was hoping to hear more about it. Since my time in Parliament, this discussion has been had on and off. And so my question really is in the vein of maturity, as the honorable member mentioned, and being informational about it and allowing the public to become aware of this report. I was just curious, there's been a lot of talk about why was it not the report made public in its commission in and of itself? Why did we not allow the public to be aware that we were going to commission a report in this manner, or in this matter, I should say?
Madam AG?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Cabinet is aware of the direction of travel with regard to constitutional reform, and at the appropriate time, the government is always ready and willing to best inform the public. There's no secrecy around this matter. There have been questions that have been raised from members of the public with regard to the cost. The contract will be published and the report will be made public for all to see.
Yeah. Supplementary? No further question. Thank you. AG, the next member has questions for you. Is the opposition whip? Opposition? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honorable Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, my question relates to page 13 of the Attorney General's statement. To be clear, starting with, to be absolutely clear, there's no formula or pathway to sovereignty for Bermuda, which excludes an unambiguous democratic mandate from the Bermuda electorate. Would the Honorable Attorney General please define what the unambiguous democratic mandate is? Is that specific to, is that either a referendum or is that the results of a general election?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's for the government to determine. There are various options, and two that he mentioned are options for this government to consider at the appropriate time. But let's be clear, the democratic will of this people will dictate the outcome of that exercise, either way.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary, just to be clear, it's either result. It's either a referendum or it's or the results of a general election. Both would be defined as unambiguous democratic mandate.
You were looking for a question out of that? Yeah, I was looking for a question.
For the avoidance of doubt, would did the Honorable Attorney General say that either a referendum or a general election would be sufficient to demonstrate unambiguous democratic mandate?
AJ?
Correct.
Okay. Any further supplementary question? Okay. Thank you for that. Oh, supplementary, yes. Opposition leader?
Can the Attorney General confirm that they would prefer to have a general election over a referendum?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that the leader of the opposition is stretching this morning. I suggest that he wait till we have a fulsome discussion on the subject matter.
Thank you. Thank you. No further supplementaries? No further questions. Thank you, Adam AG. Thank you, members. The next question this morning, the next statement this morning for questions is a deputy. The next statement this morning for question is that of the Minister of Works. Minister of Works, you have two questions. Two members have indicated questions so far. The opposition spokesman for Works, MP Kennedy.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the minister for that update. I share in his sentiment of the frustration of all of the work that has to be done. I'm actually glad that the work is being done. It needs to get done so we can get some of this stuff underground. And we're feeling the pain, yes. But I wanted to understand a little more if he could give details on the Harrington Song Road, which I travel on a daily basis. Not too long ago, we had a hole open up close to where the quarry is there, and Charco, yeah. And I was just wondering, did we ever assess exactly what happened there? Because that particular area had just been trenched, and to see it open up like that, I think the public has been curious as to why that happened, knowing that that's been that particular area has been a tough area for deaths on the road, so as well.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I don't have that information with me off the top of my head, but I can give an undertaking to provide it to the House at a later date.
Thank you. Supplementary or second question? None? Okay. Minister, the opposition whip also has questions for you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Honorable Minister. Would the Honorable Minister clarify or have any information relating to, given that there's so many traffic interruptions on the road, and they'll be that way for a little bit going forward, is there any place that a member of the motoring public can see where the roadworks or traffic interruptions will take place?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, there was a map produced about a year ago that set out all of the locations. That's the wrong map. I can ensure that it's issued again, but it was very comprehensive in terms of identifying all of the locations where the work is being carried out. It identifies, this is dated April 2022, so it's updated on a regular basis and published on a regular basis. I think you can even find it on both the Balco and the government website, but I can arrange for it to be shared with members.
Thank you. Supplementary? None? MP Jackson, supplementary.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, would the minister please provide any information about whether there would be a similar schedule or mapping of any road repaving as a part of the scheme to repave the roads once the road works have been completed? He mentioned in the ministerial statement that there would be repaving following the road works. Just curious whether there's a schedule and a map for that.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, no, there isn't a schedule and there isn't a map. And what I said in my statement was that the work had begun on Harrington Sound Road, and that's what's being carried out at present, and it will go all the way to Flats Village. But if people travel on Harrington Sound Road, they will notice that there are gaps in the repaving works. Some of that work has been done. As an example, if you drive from the North Shore roundabout to the quarry, you'll find that there are various stages where there has been remedial work done. The work has now started at near the St. Philip's Church, I think it is, and it's going forward. Both lanes are being done together. They will continue until Painters Road, where if you drive from Painters Road to Devil's Hill, that work has already been done. I should alert colleagues that you will see some construction work going on in some of those areas as we go forward, because what has happened is the trenches have been done and the piping has been done, but the cables now have to be pulled. That will require minimum disruption and probably just a few holes that need to be dug to be able to pull the cables. Once Harrington Sound is finished, we will be in the next year's budget. And so in the budget statement in 2023, we will have approved funding for road paving, and I'll be able to indicate where it is we're going to go from there. I want colleagues to understand that I am aware, based on my travels from Southampton to Hamilton, every day where every pothole is. And if they see me pulled over to the side of the road on the way to Hamilton, it's because I've stopped to send an email to potholes@gov.bm so that they can go out and fill them in. Anybody could send an email to potholes@gov.bm and they will come out and fill them in.
I was going to ask you that question, Minister, so thank you. Anyone can send stuff. Good. Does any supplementaries?
Sorry,
Continue
Mr.
on.
Speaker, just one. The minister had mentioned that the budget for this year is being used for the repaving. And I know that this is speculation, but can the minister give any indication that there will be a priority to increase, maybe substantially increase, the paving budget for 23-24, given the fact that last year, I believe it was like $60,000 was all the minister was given for repaving, and that there would be more in the budget next year for repaving.
Minister? I think she's trying to assist you for the
Mr.
budget next year.
Speaker, I don't think it was $60,000 that was issued for paving. No, but it was, give me 2 seconds, I'll tell you. Okay, so it depends on your, you can find figures everywhere, and you can. I mean, this is on page C6, under capital development, roadworks, $500,000. But under, okay. Roads, asphalt, and signs. That's it? 100,000.
I think our question, Minister, was, will you be getting an increase in next year's budget?
Let me say that I'll put in the request to the Ministry of Finance and see if we can have some success there. Because I'm sure that the Minister of Finance gets as many of the complaints about road works as I do. Which suggests to me that people are aware that the road works are going on and the roads are in a state. So I was asked recently whether the government would pay for the repairs to people's vehicles. If you know the roads are in a state, slow down. I know where every pothole is between town and Heron Bay. If you ride the road every day, you know, and we have the worst patch of road in the whole country, as far as I'm concerned, between T and Tatum and Price Right.
There are a couple of spots in Somerset I could name too. There are a few in Somerset we'll name, but we'll leave that for now. Thank you, Minister. Minister, there's no further questions for those. The next statement that has questions this morning is the statement from the Minister of Economy and Labor in reference to Bermuda immigration and protection. Minister, the opposition whip has questions for you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, thank the Honorable Minister for bringing the statement forward. On page 2 of his statement, he speaks to the problem that he's seeking to remediate in the Bermuda Immigration Protection Act. Could the minister elaborate on why having more people reside for longer in Bermuda is a problem? What exactly does this amendment seek to remediate?
Minister?
Having more people residing in Bermuda is not a problem. The problem is visitors who land in Bermuda as visitors and then determine that they want to reside in Bermuda without getting necessary permission.
Supplementary? Supplementary?
None. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you. Minister, that was short and sweet. That was the only statement, any questions for you. We'll move on to the next statement. The next statement that has questions this morning is for the Minister of Transport. Minister, you have a statement from MP Kennedy. MP?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the update from the minister. I got a bit confused about some of the percentages, and I'm hoping for some clarity. I think the first question that I have, is can the minister tell us typically how far out do cruise ships schedule a cruise? So when they're looking to do bookings, is it like a year, 2 years?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, we normally work on a yearly basis, so we're trying to project for 2023.
Supplementary?
Yes,
Go right
supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, my supplementary question is, I'm trying to understand because the minister says that the POP government is responsible for 19% of the increase. When I look at the numbers for 2017, he mentions 2016 numbers. But 2017, there was an election in July. The cruise ship industry had already had its schedule put in place, and it increased to 161. So when he says there was a 19% increase with the PLP, that's not an accurate number because the cruise ship industry had already booked 2017, and it increased to 161. And that was not due to the PLP government. Can he clarify that?
Minister?
Numbers are wrong.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I think what we was talking about at that time, in 2016, there was 397,000 number of passengers. Okay, here's the key point. In 2022 was 395,000. But the real economic impact came on the Progressive Labour Party. And that's what we was really trying to refer to, because in 2016, $76 million was economic impact. On the Progressive Labour Party in 2022 is $156 million.
Supplementary?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, listen, this statement, I've heard this statement back in 2000, I think it was 19 or something like that. The same thing, exact same information was said. My point is that the numbers here, can he explain the misleading numbers here? They're not responsible for 19% increase. It's impossible. 2017 went to 161 ports. It can't be 19%. It's misleading. Can he take it upon himself to give us accurate figures? They're not responsible for 2017's cruise line numbers.
Okay. Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the honorable member, for some reason, ignores that $157 million increase in economic activity. And then he talks about was increase in charges. Under the leadership of the Honorable David Byrd in 2019, we recognized that if you recall, the ships used to have this dredging out here. They dredged from out in the North Shore here. And at that time, RCL was carrying a mortgage. That's right. But you weren't wise enough to work on something else. And I'll tell you what it was. RCL refused to have any increases in 2019, any increases. We were wise enough to talk to them and ask them, if we pass the mortgage on to BTA, which was about $7 million, would you allow an increase? They said yes. But we also worked out the infrastructure fund, which they wasn't wise enough to think about either. So we included $25. There's no problem with the cruise line. They agreed with it. But we got a significant amount of increases in revenue under this government.
So you hit your two subs.
He's not answering the question.
You hit your two subs, so you can make a
He's
third.
not answering the question.
Yeah, you can make a second. You can make a second question. Make a second question, but it'll be a new question.
Yeah. I got a lot of questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. Is it fair to say then that your figure of 19% increase reflects also 2017's cruise line numbers increasing and revenue increasing?
Mr. Speaker, would you rather have $156 million in your bank, or would you have 19% increase in passengers? It's not a worry about how many numbers come here. The question is, how do we be able to derive significant amounts of revenue dollars?
I'm asking the question. You're not asking the question. You're not answering.
I think he's trying to tie it down to a
Supplemental,
specific
Mr.
period.
Speaker. Supplemental.
But put your supplementary.
Yeah. Listen, these numbers are not correct. Is the honorable member going to take it upon himself to correct these numbers? They're not correct.
Mr. Speaker, here's what we said. Here's what we said.
Keep it parliamentary. Keep it parliamentary. Keep it parliamentary.
Here's what we said,
You need assistance. You can answer. We miss your answer in the back and forth.
Mr. Speaker, here's what we said. Since the PLP has been in government in 2017, there's been an increase of 19% in cruise ship calls. Now, the honorable member is worried so much about calls. I'm worried about dollars. And that's what the government was working on. Once again, I'll say, they weren't wise enough to recognize that they could renegotiate the deal with RCL, which we did. And we were able to achieve a significant amount of revenue on behalf of the government, on behalf of the country on behalf of the people of this country.
Supplementary? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I have a supplementary.
Yes.
Regarding the increased number of cruise calls to Bermuda, my question to the minister is whether there is any thought being given and work collaboration with Public Works and the like, WEDCO, to make sure that the infrastructure, which will be aging every season, whether the infrastructure is being examined on a regular basis to make sure that Bermuda can accommodate increased calls of cruise ships, and also whether if we're having increased numbers of cruise ships, whether we are prepared for the influx of anchoring, having to
Point of order,
ships
Mr.
to
Speaker.
anchor, etc.
Just say, you can rise.
Point of order. I just heard multiple questions asked.
Yeah, I was following you. I was trying to figure out if there was one specific question that you wanted to put. I was listening to intent to see where you're tying it up as
All right.
one.
I'll just leave it at, is the Ministry of Transport then collaborating with Public Works and other agencies to make sure the infrastructure is suitable and appropriate for the increased number of cruise ships that are being arranged for the coming seasons?
Minister?
Yes.
No further supplementaries?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Yes, he answered. Okay.
That's all I needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Minister, that brings it clear to the questions for that statement. The last statement that indicates there are questions this morning is the statement from the Minister of National Security. Minister, the Opposition Whip has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Honorable Minister for bringing the statement to the House. My question relates to the final strategy. When will that be drafted and circulated?
Thanks for the question. I don't want to give an exact date. I would say though that we're almost there, and very soon we have something to bring to the House.
Thank you for your response. Before I take the supplementary, I did overlook that there was a question for Minister of Tourism as well. So Minister, there'll be a question for you. Is there a supplementary to the response from the Minister of National Security?
None. The second question.
Second question, yes.
Thank you. Will this strategy, or has there been any deliberations that will interrupt the current policing strategy to disrupt and deter criminal organizations?
Minister?
The simple answer to that is yes. We will be looking at overarching strategy to bring in all the different.
Supplementary?
None, Mr. Speaker.
No third question? Done? Okay. Let us just go back to the statement from the Minister of Tourism. Minister, MP Canada has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honorable Minister mentions Fairmont Southampton Princess. I was just curious, are we still on schedule for summer of 2023 for completion? 24? No, it says it was 23 first.
Minister, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As far as I know, the target date has not changed, but I can inquire and bring that information back.
You want to come back to the House?
I'll come back with I'll pose the question and come back with the answer
Yeah,
to that question.
okay. MP, supplementary or second question?
Yeah, second question.
Second question?
Thank you very much, Minister. Also, second question, he mentioned about transport challenges. One of the #1 issues with tourism was transport challenges. Can the honorable member give us any idea of thoughts on how they're going to alleviate this? I know they're in discussion, but this has been a challenge for years and years now. And knowing that our honorable tourism minister is doing such a fantastic job of cruise ships, the number of people that are going to be on the island this upcoming season, how are we going to handle these challenges within not even a year?
Minister?
As I said in my statement, my ministry, I will get together with the Minister for Tourism, for Transport, as well as the BTA, and we will look at solutions for this.
Supplementary?
Supplementary, yes, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
I've been told by a couple of taxi drivers that the shipping agent, the shipping desk have told their clients, do not take taxis on Sunday because they're very expensive. We suggest that you find other means of transportation. Can the minister speak to that?
Minister? Minister?
I've not heard this before, and I believe the leader of the opposition could have posed this question directly to the shipping agents.
Supplementary? Supplementary? No supplementary? MP Canada, do you have a third question? Okay. Members, that now brings us to a close of the question period. And we thank you, members, for your participation. We thank you for the responses from the ministers, and it was most appreciated. We now move on, and the next item on the order paper this morning is the congratulatory